Sam Maglio is joining us. He's a professor of both marketing and psychology at the University of Toronto. Earned his PhD in psychology at NYU and now studies narrow topics like time, emotion, well-being. And he's going to share some of that with us today. In fact, he's going to think about a question that I'm sure we've all thought about, which is how long do people use their stuff? So without further ado, Sam.
So we know so much about what leads people to choose their stuff, what leads people to choose a product, a job, a city to live in, a partner. And then we kind of stop looking at them. We examine how situational factors make people more or less likely to adopt behaviors and products, and then we go away. What I'm going to do with this project is look at them a little bit longer. Because the assumption that I make, I can do this. The assumption that I make is,
Click on
Click back on the presentation.
on the slide.
thank you, there. So that choosing is for using. The reason why you, is this going to work? Oh, good. The reason why you choose something in the first place is because you want to derive a stream of utility from it over a long period of time, whether it's a computer or a pet or a car or a sweater. We acquire things in the service of using those things. A lot of the research looks at what leads people to choose things. I'm more interested in how long do they keep those things after they acquire them. So by way of a definition, I'm going to think about usage, I might also say retention or keeping, as the amount of time over which people consume a continued stream of utility from a good or service. How long do you hang on to the thing that you've acquired after you've acquired it? We know that people get stuff, and we know that people get rid of stuff. We know that when you buy a new Lacoste polo, you're aware of how much it cost you, and you want to spread those fixed costs over time. You want to get your money's worth out of it. So people are aware of how long they're going to keep their stuff for before they buy it, and then they acquire their stuff, and then eventually they get rid of their stuff. And research has looked at different means of disposing of products. Right? People are more satisfied with getting rid of something if they can give it away to somebody else instead of just throwing it in the garbage can. So products clearly, and I'm belaboring the point for a reason, have a life cycle of you get it, and then eventually you get rid of it. I don't want to look just at upgrades, right, for like a single product that you only have like one phone. I want to look at, so that you can think of disposal as like, oh, I'm going to upgrade to the next version of this phone or get a new computer. I want to look at products where you have it for a while and then eventually you decide to no longer have it. This was, in a big way, a dependent variable in search of an independent variable. And so what my colleague Evan Pullman and I did when we were like, so what should we do first? And the first thing that we did was nudges. I mentioned at the top that we know a lot about what leads people to acquire things, and nudges are a big candidate for what coaxes people into choosing one option over another. I'll present that study first, and then second, I'll talk about decision style, how people make their choice in the first place. So we start with nudges because there seemed to be a potential distinction between what, like a nudge could lead people to choose something, but it might not necessarily lead people to use that thing for a really long period of time. You could differentiate a couple different points within choosing versus using. You might choose them because you want it, but wanting something doesn't always go along with liking something. There's a story about being jilted, right? Like you're trying to acquire something, and then there's an obstacle, it's hard to get it. You're like, damn, I want to get that even more now. But does that necessarily mean that you really enjoy it once you get it? Not necessarily. You can also break it down between decision utility versus experience utility. Feels good to get a good deal. Oh, if something on sale, then more compelling to purchase it, but not necessarily going to be something that you like over a long period of time. My favorite study that motivated this work comes from Hanks and colleagues in 2012. What they did was they nudged people to choose healthier options at a lunch counter, or like at a lunch buffet. And the nudge worked. They made it easier for people to choose healthy options. And as a result, they chose more healthy options. And that's the conclusion of the paper, is the nudge worked. Look, we make it easier for people to choose the healthy option, and then they do. But buried in the paper, they also weighed people's plates to see how much they actually ate. And they didn't eat any more fruits and vegetables. They took them off the shelf, and then they threw them away. So, did the nudge work? Depends how you ask the question. Did people choose the healthy thing? Yes. Did they consume the healthy thing? Not so much. And so, that's why we're taking this longitudinal perspective on, well, what are you measuring? Do you want to know the choice, or do you want to know longer-term outcomes? So, I'll tell you about just one study on the nudge topic, where we wanted to test the compromise effect. So in a control condition, we asked people to choose between two different options. In the treatment condition, we added a third compromise option. What that looked like was this. So Evan ran this at Madison, where he set up a table on the Madison campus and asked people, said, hey, free air plant. Come by, I'm just giving air plants away. In the treatment condition, the compromise condition, Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, and as you can see in the description, we set it up so that Plan B would be the compromise option, and we thought that framing it as a compromise in this way would lead people to be more likely to choose Plan B. In the control condition, it was just what's described here as B and C, but we called it A and B. So then people chose, and I put this at the bottom, please flip the page over and continue the survey. When you're finished, I'll give you your chosen plants. Now, of course, they're all the plants are hidden behind the table, and everyone gets the same plant after they choose. So the good is the same, just described differently, and it was set up so that it was a nudge or not. And then we made it there's no such thing as a free air plant. We said, I'm going to give this to you as long as you give me your email address. Because I'm going to come nag you every 2 weeks and ask you how your plant's doing. So we waited 2 weeks and contacted them. Said, do you still have the plant? And they responded, yes or no. There was a surprisingly high rate of people that just went along with us. And then, if they ever told us that the plant was dead, then we stopped bothering them. We did it 17 more times. So every 2 weeks, 17 time periods. 200, that's the math, on how long, or whether they still had it. And then we stopped the survey. So I'll mention here with no date, the compromise effect worked. When we nudged people to choose Plan B, they were more likely to choose Plan B. What's awesome is that in the treatment condition, there's 3, right? So there's about 100 people out of 200 in that condition. But 100 chose the nudged option. In the control condition, just 2 options, another 200 people, about 50-50 split. So 100 and 100. So we've got 100 people that chose Plan B when they were nudged, and 100 people that chose Plan B when they were not nudged. And so you could do the data differently, I'm happy to talk about that, but what I'm going to show you is everyone picked the same plant, got the same plant, and it was described identically. How long did they keep it for? At the beginning, if you don't look over time, there's no difference between my green and blue bars. There's no difference between the compromised condition and the not compromised condition. But after we bothered them for long enough, we were able to measure if they still had their plant, around period 7, you start to see this difference emerge where people who were in the compromised condition were more likely to tell us their plant was no longer with us. And in the control condition, they kept it for a little bit longer. You could analyze this in different ways, like I said, but in general, there was a 16% greater likelihood of plant death, or they said that they didn't have it anymore, in the compromised condition. We get the same thing when we do not with air plants. We get the same effect when we do default options. We get the same effect when we do social norms. Like this thing, it has more users, and has a higher star rating. People choose it. They're more like the nudge, the intervention works. However, they're also less likely to use it for an extended period of time. So in the second area that we want to look at was decision style. And that can be very big. And so what I mean by decision style is maximizing and satisfying. I would imagine that this is a thing that most people in this room are aware of, but the way that I teach it to my students is I tease my wife a little bit. I say, imagine that you're on a road trip and you forgot to download any music and you don't have satellite radio, and so you have to just like pick something to listen to. And the way that my wife will drive from Toronto to Syracuse, New York, where her parents live, we do this drive a lot, is she will just hit scan on the radio and listen to every station for 15 seconds at a time, and then go to the next station. She will drive 4 hours listening to 15-second snippets of different songs. This I would describe as maximizing, always trying to find a better option, as opposed to satisficing, where your choice is determined more by finding something that is good enough and going along with it, like listening to a whole song. So instead of manipulation, like in the nudge study, this is going to be, we're just going to measure their personality style. How, like, are you a maximizer or are you a satisficer, and how long do you use your stuff? We ran the eggplant study just before the pandemic. And then it was hard to run in-person studies where you gave stuff to people. And so I'm going to try to interpret this as a good thing, because we did air plants, which I would think about as like a physical good. Instead, we sat around Evan's table and created a service. And the service that we created was a membership. Like the air plant study, everyone's going to end up with the same membership, but just to make it like a thing, we said choose between these 6 different daily joke of the day sites. So we could pretend like there was a choice involved. And then we measured how people made choices. As an individual difference measure, we did a 2-factor approach to maximizing, which is, on the one hand, goal maximizing, which says, I don't like having to settle for good enough, and strategy maximizing. The kind of person that spends a lot of time making their decisions, saying, I just won't make a decision until I'm comfortable with the process. So we know how so they made a choice, and then we know what kind of decision maker they generally are. And then afterward, we said, okay, now that you've made your choice, welcome to the membership. I'd like you to log in right now. It was a Qualtrics survey, right? So they click on the link, go over there and log into the joke of the day site, and bookmark it. And the link that we gave them allowed us to track who they were, right? So everyone got an individual link that went to, and it already existed online, like some joke of the day membership site. But because they were following that link that we asked them to bookmark, we could tell who was going and how often they were going. Now, maybe they would go multiple times in a day, but there was only 1 new joke per day. So you get 1 joke per day every time they logged in, and we measured them for a month. What we found was that goal maximizing, the kind of people that say, I just want the best option, that approach to making decisions made people less likely to come back time and time again and use take advantage of the membership that we had offered them. On the other hand, the strategy maximizers, the people who said, I'm going to really scrutinize this decision, were significantly more likely to come back over and over, to use the service for a longer period of time. The reason I think this is so interesting is this. No one called me out on it, but earlier I said in my nudge thing about choosing versus using, right, that liking seems like a very obvious predictor of how long people should use their stuff. But we know from the literature on maximizing and satisficing that maximizers are chronically unhappy with what they get. That was true of these people too. Our strategy maximizers said, how satisfied are you with what you chose? They were less happy with it. Yet they came back over and over and kept using it. So what I like about this research area is that it's not so simple as, the more, like if you like it a lot, then you'll use it for longer. It seems like there's a lot of different factors that could play into how long people use their stuff. A lot of people in this room probably consider themselves consumer researchers. We publish in the Journal of Consumer Research, and often when we publish those studies, we don't look, I would argue, look at consumption. We look at choice, we look at other things, I'm being dramatic, but what we like about this research is that it puts consumption at the center of the investigation. It's a little bit harder to do. You start a timer and then measure how long people use their stuff, but it leads to these really interesting insights. Interesting insights from both a practical and a theoretical perspective. For theory, you could start asking questions like, what determines how long people use their stuff, right? I told you earlier that liking seems like it should be a candidate, and it might be one, but it's not the only one. There's a rich world of possibilities that could lead people to use their stuff for longer or shorter. What I think the answer might be is actually something I'm working on with Tali Wright currently. What would be consistent across the two things that Tali Wright works upstairs? What would be consistent across the two studies that I showed you? That if you're nudged, you use something less, and if you are a maximizer, you use something more. To me, it might be that you feel like it might be that the more you feel the decision is yours, that you see your true self reflected in the choice that you made, now you feel more attached to it. The same way that, like, if you give your car a nickname, you're more likely to hang on to your car for longer. The more you see your honest true self reflected in the choice you made, that might be the determinant. So in some data that we just collected, we asked people to choose either intuitively or deliberatively between the different Joke of the Day membership sites. And the people who chose intuitively, who said, yeah, that's my true self in my choice, they were more likely to use the service for longer. Now, what's really fun about this is that the people who chose intuitively also spent less time making the choice. But I just showed you that the goal maximizers, who spent more time making the choice, also used it for longer. So it's not just a simple story of the more time or the less time that you spend making the choice, the longer or shorter you use it. There's something else at play in determining how long people stay members of our site. I'm also really curious about how rate of usage might interact with this. I put up the Lacoste polo shirt earlier, right? Like, if you have something that you plan to keep and use for a really long period of time, do you use it all the time? Or do you only use it a little bit? We did air plants and membership sites to try to control for that, right? That an air plant just required a little bit of maintenance, like spritz some water on it once in a while, and it will stay alive. The Joke of the Day site, like, arguably it was costless, except for like a little bit of their time. There was no effort required to keep staying a member of this site. But once you get into, like how often are you going to wear that shirt? How often are you going to drive the car, right? So to look at the relationship between rate of usage and also duration of usage. So that's the theory piece. The practice part, I could see it going either way. Do firms want people to use their stuff for a longer or shorter period of time? On one hand, you might say it's better if they use it for a short period of time and then they buy a new one. But you could also tell like a self-perception story that says, oh, I just watched myself use this and then get rid of it really quickly. I must not like this brand very much. I'm going to go switch to another brand. So is it better for the firm to have people use their stuff for a shorter or longer period of time? Also, apart from firms, is it better or worse for the world for people to use their stuff for a long or short period of time? I was having a conversation last night at the reception about fast fashion. And it was interesting that that came up because that's what one of my undergrad students is working on right now, is how do we mitigate how much stuff there is in landfills? And so can we take this lens of how long do people use their stuff, maybe try to encourage them to use their stuff for longer in the service of getting more mileage out of it, but also like saving the planet and everyone leading happy lives. So from both the theory and the practice perspective, we think it's interesting to explore these new avenues that only come up once you ask the question, how long people use their stuff. Thank you.